Good evening and welcome to 2020 Crisis and Opportunity for Physicians Part 2. The Alberta College of Family Physicians Board of Directors would like to thank you for attending this webinar tonight. We're very excited to have you, and we're very excited to have our guest speaker back again for Part 2, Dr. John Van Aerde. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we'd like to kick off this evening with a land acknowledgement. The Alberta College of Family Physicians would like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 territory, and all of the people here are beneficiaries of these peace and friendship treaties. Alberta encompasses the traditional territories of many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Niitsitapi, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux peoples who have called this area home for many generations. Again, for those of you who are joining for the first time, we are very lucky to have our guest speaker, who is Johnny Van Aerde. He is the executive director of an amazing organization, and he's going to give you some more information in that in a personal bio when we hand things over to him in a couple of minutes. Our next slide is his faculty disclosure. This program does receive funding from the Alberta College of Family Physicians. And that is what John has to disclose, as well as his position as the Executive Director of the Canadian Society of Physician Leaders and his faculty position with the Physician Leadership Institute. Our next slide is going to be our moderator disclosure. So the voice that you're hearing is myself. I am Carrie McNabb. I'm also being assisted this evening by Susan Wong Armstrong, Lindsay Rankin, and in the previous sessions, Nikita McEwen. We are all full-time employees of the Alberta College of Family Physicians. Our disclosure of financial support is that we are funded by the Alberta College of Family Physicians, and we also received a grant from the College of Family Physicians of Canada. We are very lucky to have a scientific planning committee who assists us in curating these webinars. These webinars are part of the ACFP Check-In and Check-Up webinar series. Our planning committee is called our Virtual Education Planning Committee that was recently put together in response to developments with COVID-19. Our committee is very diligent in curating offerings that are going to be requested and necessary for our members. So we are very grateful for them and their participation and everything that goes into planning, selecting, and putting on these webinars for our members. So a thank you and shout out to our Virtual Education Planning Committee. So at this time, we're going to pass things over to our keynote speaker, Dr. John Van Aerde.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Good evening from Vancouver Island. And I am going to talk a little bit slowly for the first first 1 or 2 minutes, not because my internet is poor, but I want people to give some time to dial in, because if everybody else is like I am, I'm always exactly and no more than 2 minutes late when I dial into a Zoom conference. So good evening, everybody. We had a thunderstorm here in Nanaimo just about half an hour ago. So I hope the lighting is okay, because I had to play a little bit with the blinds. And otherwise, everything is good here. So I hope that we get as many people as possible from last time. We had 75 attendees last time, and I see there are still people joining as we are speaking, and it's still 1 minute before 6 o'clock. So we'll add another minute before we really get going. Just to give you a little bit of background, you may have heard it last time, but I do feel for a large part Albertan, because I did live there in Edmonton for 25, 26 years. Been living in BC now for about 8 or 9 years to do different kinds of work. But in Edmonton, it was neonatal work, where we did put together and integrated a neonatal program in the Klein years. out of respect for everybody else who is dialing in on time, we're going to slowly start. And what I'm going to do actually, because I need to do that, because there's always somebody who doesn't remember how the essentials of Zoom work. And we're going to be working with breakout rooms and so forth again as well. If you look on your bar on the left lower corner, you see a little microphone, which probably is red with a stripe through it. And if you click on that, you're unmuted and you're going to be able to talk. Next to it, you have a little video camera. If you click on that one, like I do now, then it's you have a red stripe to it. And if you click on it again, people can see you. And in a moment, I will actually ask you to turn it on for a particular reason. And I'll share that with you in a moment. If you go a little bit more, almost in the middle, a little bit more to the right, you will see participants. There's 19 people who have signed in now, and hopefully a few more in the next few minutes. And then next to participants, you see chat. If you click at chat, there's a box that pops up, and you can type either to everybody or to specific people. If you want to target one or another specific person, you can type in comments, you can type in questions, and Lindsay and Carrie will very kindly draw my attention if there is anything going on in that particular box. And then I think everything else I see, but you don't see, like the polling and so forth, which we're going to have fun with tonight. The only other thing is perhaps all the way to the right, you see reactions. So if you, either want to put your hand up, a thumb up, or a clap, or whatever you want to do, that's where that action is happening. Remember last time when we went in breakout rooms, or even when we were thinking ourselves, we did need a pen and a piece of paper. So what I'd like you to do right now is grab that and then show us on the screen that indeed you do have a pen, because I'm very fond of different pens. And yep, everybody's having a pen. And the people who are blackened out, I don't know yet. But in a moment, if you want to win a prize, you will have to turn on the video camera, because what I'd like you to do in the next 90 minutes, rather than playing music and do some kind of an activity, what I want you to do in the next 90 seconds, I want you to find something in your room or around you. I mean, don't go to the neighbor or whatever, because it's only 90 seconds. So find something that makes you smile. Now be very creative. It doesn't have to be an object. It could be a drawing. It could be, you don't have to, like I say, go through the whole neighborhood. You could draw a smiley face, whatever. But in the next 90 seconds, find something that makes you smile. When you come back, turn on your video camera, show me what it is, and smile. And the people who show something and smile, when I see their faces, will receive a 1-year free subscription to the Canadian Journal of Physician Leadership starting in September. So, something that makes you smile, 90 seconds. When you come back, show it and smile, starting now. Go. If some people need to go, oh, look at that. Oh, but you guys are not going to need 90 seconds here. I see a baby. I see a very nice picture. Yes, I see beer. I see a plant. I see a dog. I see pens. I see a plant. Yes, I see another plant. I see a cat. Hello. Very good. Yes. Who else do I see? Yes, with more children and pets. I love it. I love it. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, nice family picture. Thank you very much, Susan. Yes. All right. There's a few people still who are blackened out, but they're probably still looking for something. You still have 40 seconds. Oh yeah, the view outside, nice as well. All right, and I will take a screenshot and then send that to Carrie. In 30 seconds, I'll take a screenshot, and then we'll make sure that you get your hello cat, that you get your subscription. Hello, how are you? I'm waving at the screen. You guys don't know who I'm waving at, but there's children, there is dogs, there is cats, and oh, and there's a ducky. Yes, there is a ducky. So make sure, guys, that you put yourself on gallery view so you can see everybody. Right upper corner, if you go to gallery view, you see everybody except the people who are blackened out. And I always wonder whether they're actually there. Some people have difficulties. Some people have difficulties with video, and that's okay. All right. And somebody said, gave me a private text and said, I wish you had a gift card for Starbucks. But I don't, because I used to be a frequent customer. I can't go anymore with this whole COVID thing, right? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I mean, that was absolutely fantastic. We are, I hope, somewhat energized to start. And I don't know whether anybody of you yesterday saw The National. Right, it was The National, and they go like, oh, Zoom fatigue. You get so tired from looking at Zoom the whole day. Yeah, if you only look at Zoom and people go blah, blah, blah and whatnot. So today we've built in a couple of things that will energize you. What I'd like to do, I'm going to screen share for a moment. I want to give, if that's okay with everybody, a 5-minute overview of what we did last time, because it links into your homework. Don't worry if you didn't do your homework. I mean, I'm not the teacher that's haunting you from 20, 30, 40 years ago or whatever. We'll link it with the homework, and then we'll move on for today. So give me a chance, please, to share my screen here. There we are. And may I please have a thumbs up if you can see that? I got a thumbs up. Thank you very much. All right. So this is what we talked about last time. So what we're addressing in the 2 workshops is crisis and opportunities. I mean, they both are kind of 2 sides of a balance, so to speak. And what we talked about, or are talking about, are 5 ways to thrive. Last time we talked about perspective, and we talked a little bit about acceptance and influence. And today we're going to talk about purpose, belonging, and energy to thrive. And we'll do that in an interactive way like we did last time. I would like to quickly, though, put in perspective again what we're dealing with as a society, as a profession, as the world, so to speak. And if you remember, I started with the very first drawing where in the ordinate I wrote the rate of change, and then the abscissa we did time. And if you remember, the adaptability of humanity, of humans, is kind of linear. It's not kind of, it is linear. And then when we look at what's happening around us now, this is how it used to be, and all of a sudden we're seeing that the rate of change of the world, of the systems, of the health system and everything around us is increasing exponentially. And so if we're not very careful, we're going to end up in this zone here, which is a zone of fear. And when our brain deals with fear, it no longer sees possibilities. It disengages the prefrontal cortex, and we are really in trouble. And so what I'm hopefully trying to do a little bit with you is help you give a couple of skills, a couple of tools where we increase or change the slope of our adaptability so that we kind of stay ahead of the curve that we're talking about. That is the purpose, overall purpose. If you want me to summarize the 2 days in one slide, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And if you remember the first one that was around perception, we talked about how we have the freedom to choose, to have a choice between when a stimulus comes in, either a stimulus that is an internal feeling, an internal thought, or an external stimulus, the environment, people around us, our upbringing, and how we have the possibility to respond, the ability to respond in different ways, in a proactive way, using generative language. And you may remember that we had the table with the two different kinds of languages. Some was reactive, that's the way it is, there's nothing much we can change, and how we were able to change that into more proactive language. And then we sent you out in breakout rooms, and you talked a little bit about how proactive people sounded like, how proactive people, how you felt being around them. And another set of groups talked about the reactive people, so to speak. And then we went to the next framework and said, hold on a second here. If there is a space between the stimulus and the response within which we can make a decision, well, what can we actually control and not control? And some of you may remember, I hope everybody, that we had three kind of concentric circles, right? First of all, anything outside of the circle, that's not of any concern of us. And you may remember that I said, we're not really concerned right now about the number of tractors that are being produced in China. But there are a lot of things that we are concerned about, and that is in these three concentric circles here. Now, some of that we have no control over at all. It's beyond our control, beyond our influence. Some of it is under our direct control. That's our own thinking, our own behavior. And some of it is under our indirect control because we can influence through our language the behavior of others. And you may remember we looked at a table with a missed flight, happiness, and so forth. And we decided, in the end, we said a lot of that is situational and can fall in any of the three circles. And then finally, what we said was the goal is that we increase our circles of control and our circles of influence as much as possible by influencing our mental models, by making choices and decisions that are based on our purpose and on our values. So what we also did last Thursday was, at the very beginning, I asked each of you to write down, it was the first time you used your pen, to think about a situation in your life, something that was going on that frustrated you and that you tended to respond to negatively. And if you didn't bring your notes, I hope that you still remember what it was. And what I asked you to do for homework, and I think that that was followed up by an email yesterday or this morning, I think it was yesterday, was a couple of questions. And the questions were around the three circles of influence, really, or the three circles of concern. What can you control and influence and what not? How can you expand your inner circles of control and influence? And what might be signs that you're spending too much time in the outer circle, the circle where you have no control over, and how might you move back into the inner circles? Now, knowing myself, some people are probably panicking a little bit and going, oh, I didn't do my homework. So don't worry about it, because that's not the question what we're going to be working with in a moment. What we're going to be working with in a moment is this question. So you know what your case, your situation is that you took. You remember these 3 questions. What can you control and influence? How can you expand your inner circles? And how do you know that perhaps you're spending too much time in the outer circle? The question I want us to reflect around now for the next little while is, how did the 3 questions, how did the 3 circles, control, direct control, influence or indirect control, no control at all, that model, that way of thinking, how did that influence your thinking as it pertains to your case or in general? What changed? What changed in your thinking, and why did it change that way? What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to send you out in breakout rooms to talk around that question. So you don't have to talk about your case, because that may be very personal. You don't even need to talk about the 3 questions. But thinking back about last Tuesday, what we learned about these 3, the model of the 3 circles, if you have done a little bit of your homework, have a conversation in your breakout room where you will be with 4 or 5 people, and share with each other how that model may have changed your thinking. Just that you remember how the breakout rooms work. When you see the word breakout room, click on it. I think last time there were about half a dozen people who didn't know they have to click on it, and they kind of stayed in the waiting room. And I mean, like, look, we're physicians, right? Waiting rooms are boring. So it's way better if we can get into the breakout rooms, right? So click on the breakout room, and there'll be a slight delay. It takes about 3 or 4 seconds before you get in there. While you're in the breakout room, Carrie will, every 5 minutes, we'll send you reminders. There's so much time left, so much time left. And then when you see the room will be closed, you still have 60 seconds. Now, what I'd like you to do is, when you enter the breakout room, decide at the beginning who will be the spokesperson. And the spokesperson doesn't have to do a lot, don't worry. The spokesperson only has to write down 1 or 2 sentences reflecting some of the thoughts that were shared during the breakout room conversation. So please enter your breakout room. Don't forget to click on the breakout room. So the question again is, how did the model of the 3 circles, how did the 3 questions that you got for homework, how did that influence your thinking for your personal case, or perhaps your view of some issues that you're dealing with in general? Is that okay? We will see you back. You have 10 minutes for that, because with 4 or 5 people, you only have 2 minutes each. So 10 minutes, and then we will see you back. See you soon. There we are. We're all back. Wonderful. Time goes fast, right? When you're with many in one room. All right. What I would like, if possible, is for the spokespeople. So there should be about 8 or 9 spokespeople to type in 1 or 2 sentences in the chat box, and then we see how we can synthesize what came out of this break room interaction. So take your time. I mean, it takes, you know, a little bit to type a sentence. And just the spokespeople of each group, please. What were some of the key kernels of wisdom that came out of your breakout room conversation? The solutions to my problems centered around what I controlled. I realized there were more things I had control over than I didn't. And that's where I think that the table that we used on Tuesday was nice as well, because all of a sudden you saw that it was more than one column, so to speak. Our first problem seemed like something we couldn't control, but after some thought, we realized that we could often influence or control aspects of the problem. Yes, very similar indeed. The group was able to identify better what they could control and not control, and temper reactions to those, but more importantly, took the time to identify areas where they might have influence to create some positive outcome. And influencing is absolutely crucial, right? And it's not just the content of what we say, it's also the intent and how we say it. But that's a whole 2-day course just on different ways of communication, so to speak. It was useful to, the group was able to identify better what they could control, yes. And they might influence to create some positive outcome, indeed. It was useful to write down the problem in the search of an answer. Isn't that the truth? Very often we have ideas in our head and whatever, and we kind of think something. And we use very, as you know better than I do, very different parts of our brain to write something down. Not only does it slow our thinking process down, but we also use a different part of our brain. This led to a more analytical approach and a calmer and more thoughtful approach. And about calmness, we will spend a few minutes later on as well, because that's very difficult in times of crisis. And one of the things, for example, that we're seeing right now in the health system, as I kind of monitor across the country, is that talking about calmness, the sense of anger among the healthcare workers has gone up in the last 4 to 5, 6 weeks. And Mamta Gautam, who some of you may know, just published with us a 2-page bulletin that I'm very happy to share with you through Kerry on basically why that is and how we kind of deal with that. Focus on smaller issues, yes. Sometimes breaking it down before looking at the big thing help with anxiety and with other things as well. We recognize that even if we cannot control, we can control and influence our reaction. And that's easier to accept, sometimes difficult if you gave it your best try. And lastly, Lana's group wrote, categorizing your problems into one of the circles, realizing that something that is frustrating you on an ongoing basis may be either out of your control and then you have to punt it at some point in time, or you may be unable to see how you can influence it. This is a gray area and is important to recognize. Innovation may be the product when you are able to move from a circle of no control to influence. Very interesting point. And again, you cannot be creative and therefore not get into innovation unless you engage your prefrontal cortex. And you can only do that when you use the proactive type of mindset, which is what we started with basically on Tuesday evening. Very, very nice. Very similar messages with a little bit of different nuances, but very, very nice categorizing or synthesizing of what it is we have worked with. And it makes me very comfortable and happy to move on because these principles, have settled in a way that you can, and we come back to that later in the evening, that you can apply it at work. Lindsay, if I may please have the slide that it's going to bring us to the third way. And what I want to talk about, Lindsay, if you just can go back one click, that's great. Well, now one forward. Yes, there we are. What I want to spend between 5 and 10 minutes on is a model that was developed by Dr. Dan Diamond. Dr. Dan Diamond is a friend of mine who lives in Washington State, and he is a crisis physician. In other words, he led a very big part of the Hurricane Katrina. He was in Haiti. And so this guy knows what it is to deal with crisis. And he came up with this model where he says, look, a mindset has something to do with outcomes. And he says there's kind of two dimensions to mindsets. The first one, and you see that vertical here, is has to do with power, where at the bottom part you have people that go like, power exists from outside, and I have no power or whatever, to going to the top where people say, well, the power comes from within, not just power in the sense of I'm in command here, but also of being empowered. And that could be, do I have the skills? Do I have the data? Do I have this? Do I have that? Type of thing. And then when we click, Lindsay, what we will see on the horizontal dimension is what he calls the purpose. And on the purpose here on the left is kind of the self, where the self is center, and the self is in the center very often because people are fearful that the resources are limited and there isn't enough, so to speak, to go around. And he calls those the takers. Whereas on the right-hand side, people say, look, the purpose is to serve the others. There is enough to go around. And he calls that side of the dimension, he calls that the givers. Now, when we go to the left lower quadrant, Lindsay, the left upper quadrant, people who have the power or think they have the power, because keep in mind, I want to emphasize again, these are men's mindsets. These are not types of people. I mean, these could become types of people if they are always stuck in the same mindset. But you and I, certainly I can't speak for you, but certainly I vacillate depending on what the situation is between the four quadrants that we're going to see, that we're going to have a look at in a moment. So first of all, we have the manipulator. And the manipulator are the people, is the situation where you have the mindset that you have the power to make a difference, but you also have this frame of mind that everything is limited. You have the reactive mindset. You don't see the possibilities and what else is possible. When Lindsay clicks on the next one, then what we see is the victim. And the victim mindset is the person who not only say, I'm powerless. Everything is happening around me. Everything is happening to me. And it is all, of course, because it is the victim. It is around the purpose, focusing on self to find resources for the self. So when Dan talks about this and in his book, he for example says at times patients are victims when they refuse to accept some of the power to take care of their own health and their own healthcare. Or healthcare workers at times feel powerless amongst a very rapidly changing world and times. And then that, of course, results in feeling alone, isolated, and that's a very high risk type of situation. And we'll talk about that in one of the other ways, the last two ways, number 4 and 5, that we still have lined up. In the right lower corner, we find the bystander, and the bystander goes like, yep, I support that. I'm unwilling to go there. They believe in the cause and whatever needs to be done, except they go like, but I don't have the power to make any difference. And they are bystanders. They're kind of paralyzed. They don't either have the knowledge, the expertise, the skills, or the data. Ladies and gentlemen, the surveys and the data from the United States, and I assume it's very similar in Canada, before COVID-19, did show that 50% of the workforce, this is overall, this is not just healthcare, 50% is not engaged, is disconnected, kind of what they're doing. And the bystander is kind of the watcher of a game. Somebody is watching a game, very interested in the game and in the outcome, but they can't influence it, or they think they can't influence it. And then finally, we have the thriver, of course, who has the mindset that they believe that they have the power to make a difference and it's not all about them. And I would submit that a lot of the qualities, when we have that mindset, kind of is that of leadership. Now, I want to pause here for a moment, because those of you who were there on Monday may remember the story I told you about myself in Edmonton, where in 1995, Ralph Klein decided to close obstetrics in one hospital, and we were going to close, he was going to close, it was going to close, the system was going to close the neonatal unit and obstetrics in one hospital, and people were going to lose their jobs, and I didn't know what to do and what not. Guess what? I started in the victim diagram, in the victim quadrant. And then, I kind of said, you know what, but we need to do something about it and so forth. And you remember, we ended up rejigging that unit into a surgical unit, and we integrated everything regionally. But before my mindset got to where it had to go, I went from victim to bystander. I went like, yeah, we need to do something, but I have no power. I don't know how to do it. And then using different skills, learning skills, getting the data, learning how to influence people and so forth, I was able to kind of go and develop the mindset above the horizontal bar of the purpose. And I'll be honest, I tried to be thriver as much as possible, work for the common good of the babies and the staff, and trying to develop the empowerment to do that. But at times, I'll be honest, I slipped into the manipulator, where I went like, how can this work for us, us being going back in a silo of one or another unit, so to speak. So it's just an example to show you how this is a mindset. It's not a personality, and how when we realize that we have a choice, again, that comes back to the very first frame we used, we can actually end up in any of these four quadrants. Lindsay, when we click to the next slide, when we deal with somebody that we perceive as a manipulator, I'm in control and it's all about myself, or we perceive that we're going there, one of the questions we could ask is, why would any reasonable person do this? And just asking that question makes us stop and be aware, and perhaps ask either ourselves or the other person the appropriate question to figure out what's going on. Now, I'm the first one to say some people are stuck in this model and they are very difficult to deal with. There's no question about it. I mean, 2 to 5% of the people we do deal with may be like that. I mean, your percentage may be higher, hopefully lower. But asking yourself this question accomplishes 2 or 3 things. The first one is you stay in conversation. The second one is you see the other person as a human being. And the third one is, or yourself. And the third one is, it helps you stay curious and positive, leaning into, I wonder what's going on type of thing. When we're in the mindset of victim, you can say, well, what's my role in here? What part of the victimization am I owning and do I have to let go? Does it have to do with my 3 circles? Does it have to do with my reactive framework? What am I missing here? Or why is the other person having a mindset of being victimized? As a bystander, that's actually the easiest, because a bystander is already convinced that something needs to be done and agrees. It's just that the bystander really is powerless, doesn't know how to do it. So, I mean, one question one can ask oneself, what should I do right now? What is the one thing that I can do right now to get out of this type of thing? And it brings us back through these 3 columns: control, influence, and no control as well. All the models, the 5 models that I show you in these 2 days, are all interconnected and interplay a lot with each other. And the next slide shows that, because what I just showed links with you have the possibility to abandon the reactivity. Reactivity is sitting below the horizontal axis. As we move into the driver quadrant, we start to see what else is possible. By asking these questions, we re-engage our prefrontal cortex. What can we control? Was part of some of the questions I just asked a minute ago in the previous slide. And how can you influence all that? By the way, all these slides will be sent to you in the next day or so through Carrie's office. So what I'd like you to do for a moment now, if I could get the visual again, please, like visual being all of us. Yep, thank you. Is like to take your pen and take 2 or 3 minutes for yourself. This is a self-reflection exercise. And the question is, when you see the quadrant, the 4 quadrants, manipulator, victim, bystander, and driver, where does your mind tend to settle naturally? Why do you think that is? And how can you move towards or stay as much as possible in the mind of the driver? So some self-reflection for yourself. Where do you tend to reside naturally? Which one of the 4 quadrants? Why is that? And what would you have to do to move into driver and stay into driver as much as possible? I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to think about that. Carrie, can you put up the polling question, please? What we're going to ask, ladies and gentlemen, nothing personal, don't worry, it's all anonymous. But just to kind of see, what I'd like to ask is, what tends to be your natural mindset? Again, this is very anonymous. You tend to be a manipulator, you tend to be a victim, a bystander, or a driver. And I'll give you 15 seconds for that. Five more seconds. Two, one, go. That's great. Can you share that, please, Carrie? So we have an equal distribution between bystanders and drivers. A little bit of victim as well. It's interesting just to see where we are as a group. Now, one of the things that those of you who watched The National yesterday on CBC may have seen was the fact that Zoom gets very tiring. So we're about halfway, just over halfway. And what I'd like to do is invite you to what I call either the finger dance or the chair dance. You can choose. Has anybody ever done a finger dance? Anybody ever done a finger dance? A finger dance is very simple. Take one hand and put this finger up. Take the other hand and put this finger up. And your fingers can dance in any way you want. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for a 45. If you don't do that, sometimes I give a course that's like 2.5 hours long. The students just disappear. They fall asleep, right? So there you go. Now you know, finger dance. You can do that at work. You can do that anywhere. People wonder what the heck are they doing, but you got a bit of energy back. So there we are. All right. We are down to the last 2 ways to see opportunities during crisis by a whole bunch of reflective ways. So what I'd like to do is put up my screen here. And I'd like to go to number 4. Number 4 being belonging and thrive. Now, if you want to summarize this, I just call it dealing with the whole syndrome. Who has ever heard of the whole syndrome? It's HALT. It's something that I experienced many times at 2 or 3 in the morning when I was on call in the neonatal unit, taking care of one or another sick infant. H stands for hungry. A stands for angry. L stands for lonely. And T stands for tired. And the elements that you see here basically deal with each of these components. In a time of crisis, in order to re-engage our brain, let's not forget our family and our friends. Make sure we spend sufficient time and make sure that we use Tarzan. Tarzan is a term that my friend Manta Gautam from Ottawa, some of you may know her. Some call her the doctor of doctors. She is a psychiatrist who has written books around the well-being of physicians and very much engaged in women physician leadership. She uses the term Tarzan, and she always says, when you're doing a fun activity, never leave that activity without planning when you're going to do it the next time. You know, in the days when we still took holidays before COVID, that would mean plan your next holiday by the time you finish your previous one. When you have a family meal, if your kids are married or whatnot and you have to get together, plan the next one. It's like Tarzan, who grabs on to the next, whatever you call these things in the journal, before he lets go of the previous one. Let's make sure we don't forget our peers. Avoid isolation. I mean, our peers are our biggest strengths at work, and be compassionate. How can I help you? Let's take care of each other's well-being. And the well-being in itself is a big leadership component that itself I could talk 2 days ago. What about your team? Be kind. Create psychological safety, that people feel safe to share things, that something is not safe. Pay attention to the organizational tribe. And very often when we deal with administrators, we get angry. And so again, this comes from Mamta. She says, in order to calm when we're angry and to calm down, she uses the ABC. A stands for acknowledge that it's happening. The B stands for burning it off. Burning it off being you go for a walk, you do an exercise, whatever. The C stands for calm, and the D stands for device. We're now on an iPhone or an iPad. You can download apps that help you in the moment to focus again. And then finally, we have our professional tribe. In the professional tribe is something that we could talk about for a little while as well, but it is, no matter what level of professional tribe or guild we talk about, it's the purpose that connects us. And unfortunately, there are 5 levels of professional tribe that we can function at. And what I see right now is because of the stress and other things that are going on, it's very hard to rise before the 3rd one. And we're going to talk a little bit Lindsay, what happened? All of a sudden, I see your screen. Okay, there we are again. There's my screen. We're going to talk a little bit about that in our last component or way in a moment as well. The 4th element here of belonging and thrive is the component or the way that I spend the least time on, because this particular one is one that would take kind of a workshop on its own, so to speak. And I know that you've had other workshops and so forth on resilience. So I chose to actually spend a little bit more time on the last component here. And the last component is what I call the energy bucket. This is our bucket of energy. And there is a lot going on. It's being drained because of we're nervous, we have some anxiety, or we have a loss of expectations. As a matter of fact, some of us are bereaving, are in some degree of grief, not different from other losses, because the world no longer is as it was 3 months ago. There is
sorry to interrupt, but if you're sharing, I can't see it. We can't see the bucket.
You can't see the bucket?
No. Not sure why.
Okay.
That's okay. We can imagine it.
No, it's okay. Something happened when all of a sudden Lindsay's screen showed. Did you see? Okay, here we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see this one?
No, we didn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Something happened in the like we sharing screens, and all of a sudden I was thrown out. So I apologize for that. So very quickly, then again, the belonging, which is the smallest component of the 5 ways that we talk anyway, represents HALT, H-A-L-T, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And so there are different ways of belonging: family and friends, peers, team, organizational tribe, and professional tribe. And I apologize that happened. I don't know how it happened, and we'll figure it out in the detail. The 5th way is basically dealing with energy and thriving. So this is our energy bucket here. You see my bucket? Here it is, energy bucket. And there is demand on that energy all the time because we have anxiety and worries. We have loss of expectation and bereavement because the world, like I said, isn't the way it used to be. There is a lot of uncertainty. People are worried about income right now, like all over the country. There is a lot of concern because surgeries aren't happening with family medicine and general practice. There are changes that have happened that are seriously affecting income. And I'm not just talking as a theoretician. As I shared with you, I have kids who are in the medical field as well. There are inefficiencies. There is so much that's draining on our bucket of energy. And actually, one of the big ones I would submit, and ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the things we need to start talking about and thinking about, is the loss of the role perception, the loss of what is it actually that we are defined to do as physicians. Because in the last 2 or 3 years, it seems to be changing every month. And the role redefinition, we need to get engaged in that as much as we have to get engaged in the redefinition of what our health system stands for, and what our health system is supposed to do. If we look then at the things that bring energy in our bucket, sometimes, and somebody actually said that when you came out of your breakout room, sometimes looking what it is that needs to be done, breaking things up in small elements helps us to kind of energize and feel a little bit again powerful, going to the top of that Dan Diamond diagram with the 4 quadrants that we talked about a while ago. Having a sense of purpose with our profession, with our organization, with our peers. Advocacy, there are so many aspects of advocacy that help us not only to fill our bucket, but I hope that you see filling the bucket somewhat links closely to the Thriver quadrant that we talked about half an hour ago. Of course, there are studies. There's actually a book now that has done the evidence review of the last 50 years of studies that were done, where they looked at the outcome physiologically, physically, cost-wise, so many aspects on what compassionate care can accomplish. One of the things they found as well is that providing compassionate care reduces the incidence of burnout. And for those of you who are interested, more than happy to send you the references on that. Kindness. Remember what Bonnie, I'm going to brag a little bit about living in British Columbia, what Bonnie says here all the time, our public health medical officer, Bonnie Henry. She says, be calm, be kind, be safe. And it's such a very soft-spoken, calm personality that I think has contributed to some of the success that we had in BC as well. I'm not saying Alberta doesn't have success. I'm just pointing out her type of leadership. Honesty is the most important leadership skill that you have to have, or trait, for people to follow you. There is plenty of evidence around that, researched over the last 35 years in different cultures. Humor. You'd say humor, like really? Humor helps with innovation and creativity. And I'll just leave it at that. Communication, of course, transparent and openly. And I think that's one of the difficulties we see between some provinces right now. Some provinces very open, very transparent. Other ones muddled up, kind of, and we see different outcomes. And then, of course, here it is again, peer support. Peer support, looking after the well-being of each other's psychological safety. and avoiding isolation. So look at this diagram on the right-hand side for a moment. Look at all the words: logistics, sense of purpose, advocacy, compassion, kindness, honesty, patience, humor, communication, peer support. I'd like you to pick one. I'd like you to pick one that you think you can apply immediately. I'll give you 30 seconds to kind of think what you're going to pick. Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to put you in a breakout room just with one partner. Some people may have two partners because I don't know right now whether we have odd or even number of people. Carrie is managing that. And you will be just for 4 or 5 minutes in a breakout room. What I'd like you to do is share with each other what you chose, why you chose it, and how you're going to implement it. Now, if you run out of time, that's okay. If you finish too early, that's okay too. There's so much going on in the world, and I'm sure that you can keep the conversation going for an extra 30 seconds or so. And if you want to leave the room, that's fine too. So pick one of the green things and then have a conversation in the breakout room with one other or two other people that show up in the room, what you picked, why you picked it, how you're going to apply it. And I will see you back in 4 to 5 minutes. Carrie, over to you. And everybody is back. Ladies and gentlemen, I have promised to never go over time, so we called you 1 minute early. We called you back 1 minute early. I'd like to share a couple of things. I hope you're going to use the learning, not just for the case that you identified, but there are so many different ways that you can use the 5 models we talked about: the space in between response, stimulus and response, the 3 circles, the diagram with the 4 quadrants, very quickly the one we had on hold and belonging, and then finally the one with the energy bucket. There is at least one thing you're going to be able to use. Think about how will you use the learning to get out of the crisis thinking into thinking, what else is possible? When you deal with the changes that are going on, not just with COVID, but in medicine in general, particularly in Alberta right now, and in redefining the role of physicians and the purpose of the health system. There's 2 more things I want to say. I want to thank Carrie, Susan, and Lindsay for helping out tonight. And I apologize for the 2 or 3 minutes you couldn't see my screen. I don't know why that happened, but there was something that had to go wrong in the 2 days, and that was it. Could have been worse, so it's all good. I really enjoyed working with you. So here is an offer. My organization, the Canadian Society of Physician Leaders, has given me permission to give each of you a 1-year free membership to our organization. So you have access to the journal. The reason we, and other things, the reason we do that is this is an accredited course and not dissimilar from when PLI courses are given or other accredited courses. we offer that for 1 year. And certainly now in the COVID situation, there are resources that may be useful for you, either in short 10-minute podcasts that we've made available free and that are released every week, and 2-page bulletins to learn some of the skills, not dissimilar from what we have talked about in the last 2 days. I want to thank all of you for sticking with me, so I'm very grateful. Thank you. And I will actually stay online as people sign off. If there is anybody who has any questions or inquiries, I will actually stay online for another 5 minutes or so while everybody else signs off. So have a fantastic evening. Thank you very much. And maybe we meet again one day. All the best.